welcoming everybody today, and very lovely to see you all. Many familiar faces, and obviously also many new ones. I like to always begin these days with a short period of our traditional chanting, and since the theme of the day is about compassion and compassion in action, I thought it'd be suitable to recite some of the verses on the what are called the Brahma Viharas, or the sublime abidings, these four qualities of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, that's happiness at the good fortune of others, and equanimity. So we'll do this in Pali first, and then we'll do the English version after. So those of you who like the mystery can have the first bit, and those of you who like the meaning, you can have the second bit. So. Annamayang chaturapamanya obasanang karomase metta sahagatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tata dutiyang tata tatiyang tata jatutang itiyo dhammado dhiriyang sabati sabatataya sabhavantang lokang metta sahangatena cetasa vipulena mahagate nahapamanena averena hambaya pajena paritava viharati karuna sahangatena cetasa ekang disang paritava viharati tata dutiyang tata tatiyang tata jatutang itiyo dhammado tiriyang sabati samba tataya sabhavantang lokang karuna sahangatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena pamanena averena ambaya pajena bharitava viharati mudita sahangatena cetasa ekang disang bharitava viharati tata dutiyang tata tatiyang tata chatutang itiyo dhammado tiriyang sabati samba tataya sabhavantang lok mudita sahangatena cetasa vipule namahagatena appamanena averena hambaya pajena paritava viharati upeka sahangatena cetasa ekang disang bharitava viharati tata dutiyang tata tatiyang tata jatutang itiyo dhammado tiriyang sabati sabatataya sabhavantang lokang upeka sahangatena cetasa vipulena mahagatena appamanena averena hambaya pajena paritava viharati. I will abide, pervading one quarter, with a mind imbued with loving kindness. Likewise the second, likewise the third, likewise the fourth, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with loving kindness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with compassion, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with compassion, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with gladness, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with gladness, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. I will abide, pervading 1/4, with a mind imbued with equanimity, likewise the 2nd, likewise the 3rd, likewise the 4th, so above and below, around and everywhere, and to all as to myself. I will abide, pervading the all-encompassing world, with a mind imbued with equanimity, abundant, exalted, immeasurable, without hostility and without ill will. Well, welcome once again to everyone. When I chose the theme for this day long, Marianne likes to plug us well in advance to get themes and titles for these events. So I think it was about October or November last year that I came up with the themes for the first couple of day longs this year, and so this seemed to be a good theme to be speaking about compassion in action, and the working consciously with the experience of suffering of ourselves and others. So I didn't realize at the time that I chose the theme that actually there was going to be a sense of loss on my own side of leaving California, and that it was in December when I was in Thailand with Ajahn with some community meetings there. Ajahn Sumedho asked me if I would be prepared to leave Abhayagiri Monastery and go to England and take up the role of abbot at Amaravati, where he's been leading the community for the last 25 years. And prior to that, he's been leading communities for more than 15 years in other monasteries. So I was very happy to help him and to support him in his attempts to retire. So he would really like to spend, he's 75 now, and he'd really like to spend the rest of his years not having to run communities, but be more of a freelance wandering monk and teacher. So I was very happy to support that, but also I had no particular intention or wish to leave Abhayagiri Monastery. So there's when people ask me, how do I feel? Sometimes many lay friends have said, oh, congratulations on the promotion. And I kind of think, well, thank you. But then my monastic friends go, oh, really? You're going to, ooh, wow, sadhu, with glad it's not me written in sort of 72-point type underneath, So, because they know what goes along with the, you get the big cushion to lean against, but you get a lot of other responsibilities involved in the mix. So, in a way, it's a good theme to be exploring, that sense of working with painful conditions in ourselves or in others, and seeing how they mingle, because often life is not just one single shade of pleasure or one single shade of pain, but in many instances, it's mixed feelings that we're experiencing. There's because sometimes what we think of as a difficult condition or something that we wouldn't have chosen actually brings incredible riches with it. And so this is a theme I'll probably be looking at during the day. Also, the title for the day is a little bit esoteric, and as I think I mentioned in the little bit of blurb with the theme, that these it comes from the words "don't push, just use the weight of your own body." It comes from a particular letter that we received after the passing away of a very good friend of ours, one of the Abhayagiri lay ministers. We have a group of about a dozen people who are lay ministers associated with our monastery. This is a fellow called Kandanya, Barry Kapke, who's here in the Bay Area and was very involved in body work, and also he was one of the early pioneers of Buddhist websites. He founded Dharmanet back in the early 90s. He was Mr. Dharmanet. And he's a very quiet guy, very shy, but very active. And he died of bowel cancer here in San Francisco in a very lovely hospice. I was with him at the end of his life, and his last night, myself and his former partner, Anne Marie, and Dennis Crane, and I spent the night, his last hours with him. And when we held a funeral ceremony, a memorial ceremony for him, he left his body to the university. He didn't want it to go to waste. So he left his body to the university, but we had a memorial ceremony for him up at the monastery. And a former student of his called Rachel Starbuck, who lives overseas now, sent a very beautiful, touching letter. And I thought I'd like to share that with you to begin the day and to introduce these themes, because it was she who spelled these out. I'd heard Kandanya touch on these once in a while, here and there, but it was her articulation of this in this particular letter that I wanted to share, and also to build the teachings around today. So this was a letter to be read out at Kandanya's memorial. Kandanya was my teacher. I now live in Taiwan, so I will not be able to join you at the memorial, but I wish I could be there. I had the good fortune to study shiatsu with Barry at the San Francisco School of Massage. He really did teach bodywork as nothing less than a spiritual practice. He said, "The heart of our work is simply to offer our presence. Don't push, just use the weight of your own body. Don't diagnose, just be aware. Don't try to help, but also don't turn away. Just be with the person, that's all you have to do." And Barry really practiced what he preached. You could see it as clear as day, watching him work. It was an amazing and beautiful thing. When I attended my first week-long silent retreat at Spirit Rock, Barry was there too. The retreat wasn't easy for me, and on the last day I felt quite overwhelmed. I couldn't stop the tears streaming down my face even when it was time for lunch. It wasn't about the food. I remember standing in line, holding my plate, weeping and embarrassed to be weeping, thoroughly miserable. I took my food to the farthest corner of the farthest table and sat down, but I was too upset to eat. Then I noticed that someone had come to sit with me. It was Kandanya, Barry. He didn't say anything. He didn't do anything. He didn't even look at me. He did exactly what he always taught us to do. He just sat there, slowly eating his lunch, being with me in my suffering, neither trying to help nor turning away. But it was so profoundly comforting to me, even now tears come just to think of it. Some years later, my sister was birthing her first child at home, and I was there to assist her. I'd taken a special class on massage for birthing mothers, but once my sister's labour had started, she couldn't stand for anyone to get near her, much less touch her. All she did was scream, and there was nothing we could do. Then I remembered what Barry had showed me. I sat down next to her on the floor. I didn't say anything. I didn't look at her. I didn't touch her. I just sat there with her while she suffered through her labour pains, neither trying to help nor turning away. I don't know how long we sat together like that, but later, after her son was born, she told me how profoundly comforting it had been for her, how my just sitting there had somehow allowed her to relax and feel less afraid. Now Kondanya has died, but what he taught is still moving through those of us who had learned from him. Now when I see my sister quietly holding her son after a bad dream, neither trying to help nor turning away, and I then see the comfort he feels as his little body starts to settle and relax, then I see Kondanya's work alive. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell this story. I truly wish I could be at the memorial service to express the deep gratitude I feel for Kondanya's presence in my life. Respectfully yours, Rachel Starbuck. So that's a wonderful, wonderful account. And so it had occurred to me that there was a very, very fine expression of principles. And when we are trying to work compassionately in our lives, in our families, in our workplace, in the world, trying to take action, and to the qualities that are expressed there, I find are in a way, in order for our good efforts, our noble intentions to be actualized, for them to really bear fruit, these are extraordinarily helpful qualities to take in. And these are different themes that we'll look at during the day. But just to first of all highlight those different things that he described, to not push, but just to use the weight of your own body. So there's a leaning, there's an intentionality, but we're not pushing insofar as we're not creating an imagined goal, an imagined good place over there that we're trying to get to, and thereby ignoring what's actually here. In order to work, in order to exercise effort, as long as we think of, there's this thing in the way, there's this knot, there's this argument, there's this tension, and if only this wasn't here, then we could be in this beautiful place over there. And we create an imagined there somewhere off in the future, and we miss what's actually here. You know how it is when you're hiking, if you're sort of off imagining, looking at where you're going to get to, that's when you trip and sprain your ankle. When we fixate on an imagined goal, we miss where we actually are. And so our tendency is to push, to press for to that imagined future. As he said, don't diagnose, but just be aware. So our thinking mind loves. I have one of these. Those we don't have to have a confession moment, but there's a few of us here who love to figure things out, to have a nice map, a description. This is what's going on, and so that certainly the intellect does have its place. It's really useful to be able to figure out how things work and the mechanics of our lives and our minds and the way things function. But we can be over prone to that. We can, in a way, take refuge in having an explanation. And again, I confess to being a compulsive explainer, and having to have a nice, neat description of what's going on, how it works. But what we can do again is, when we're with someone or we're with a situation, the mind can race towards, I know what's going on, I understand this. This fits. This, I read a book about this. I did a course on this. I talked about this last week. I know what's happening here. And we immediately go to the memory, the idea, the concept, and again we miss what's actually before us, what we're actually in the middle of, what we're part of, because we've gone to the diagnosis, and we're missing the actuality. Again, it's not that we don't make, like we're not pushing, it's not that we don't make effort, and with diagnosing, it's not that we don't use the intellect or the way of recognizing patterns, but it's a question of holding those things in perspective. And then the last one that she describes here, don't try to help, but don't turn away. That feeling of, I want to do something. When we're particularly in the midst of other people's suffering, we can have that, I got to do something, or everything is telling us, don't just sit there, do something. Or if you read Sylvia's book, don't just do something, sit there. But there is a strong compulsion. I mean, she used that title because the compulsion is when we're in the face of difficulty, that we can't just leave it alone. If we leave it alone, it means we don't care. We're somehow disconnecting, or we're not doing our bit. But that urge to help and to do can often be coming from our own insecurity, right? Our own need to be a helpful person. That's our identity. Is maybe there's many professional helpers here, social workers, therapists, Buddhist monks. It's our trade is to be helpful, and so that I should be doing something here. Someone's coming to me and they're asking. And so that what this is pointing to, this principle is pointing to, is the aspect of tryingness, the tryingness of a tension in our own heart, and that is oftentimes overeager. That we're doing the best thing we can, but we don't realize what's actually happening before us. Like I often tell a story that Ram Dass tells about when his stepmother was dying, and this was quite a number of years ago. So Ram Dass, he's a meditation expert, done all this work on death and dying. It's his field. He really knows his stuff, and so his mother's lying there, and her breath is quite shallow, and she's sort of drifting in and out a bit, and so Ram Dass is saying, so go to the breath, Mom, feel it, just you're breathing in the universe, breathing in the light of the universe, breathing out, let everything go, and you're just one with the tides of life, and just as the light arises, just go to the light, Mom, go to the light, and just feel the breath coming and going. I'm just riffing on the theme, but you get the general impression, And then after some time of this, Ram Dass, half an hour or so, Ram Dass pauses for breath, and his mom sort of inclines her head to him and says, Ram Dass, be quiet. And it's him who tells the story, so I don't feel shy about passing that on. So that he's trying to help, but that very tryingness of I'm the helper. I've written books about this. This is my trade, so I should be doing something here. And it's my mom. She's dying, and so I've got to help. And yes, there's a need, and yes, there's things that we can do. But that very urge, that agitated tension that wants to jump in and do something, can be the very element that gets in the way. When we talk about, say, not trying to help or not trying to fix, not trying to diagnose, it can come across as an indifference, and I'm not trying to encourage a quality of dissociation or like what's the problem, Mom? All things are impermanent. Everything arises and passes away. Get over it. It's not that kind of a cold distancing or trying to just alienate yourself from the feeling of others' suffering. You're not just saying it's just it's just insignificant. It's just trying to adopt some kind of false objectivity. I'm not trying to encourage that, but hopefully during the day we'll get a sense for how we can find that place that is both fully empathetic with the suffering of others and the difficulties that we experience, but also not suffering on account of it. Because in Buddhist psychology, compassion, karuna, is not a state of suffering. And the Buddha points out that if you're suffering on account of the suffering of others, that's not true compassion. That's a distorted or a false kind of compassion that's not really complete or not really purified. It's not whole. But right there in our English word for it, compassion literally means to suffer with. Like the passio means to suffer, means suffering. Like the Passion of Christ is not Jesus getting excited. It's the suffering of Christ on the way to the cross and so on. And the com means with, so the English word literally means to suffer with. But the Buddhist principle is talking about something else. It's fully attentive and open to the pain of others, but not suffering on account of that. Now, culturally, that's really hard for us to find. I think people would agree. Well, either you turn away, or you're indifferent, or you shut yourself down, or somebody's crying and they're upset. You feel upset for them. You're supposed to get involved, and it's also one of the things that's interesting with the way people have been relating to Mr. Obama not getting angry about the oil spill. That he won't get full of blame and start yelling, and he said, "You should get angry. You should be upset. You should show that you care." And it's really interesting that showing that you care is supposed to be demonstrated by getting angry, by getting woven into the same feelings that other people are reacting with. Whereas, to me, I'm not a political commentator, and I'm sure this is a superficial view, but it seems to be what he's putting more attention on is trying to do the right things that actually solve the problem, rather than demonstrating a reactivity just to please the crowds. So similarly, when we are, and I would say he's not a cold man. He's not shut down at all. He's aware of what's going on, but he's just not getting drawn into the emotional reactivity. He's not swept up in that feeling. That's my reading, anyway. So similarly, when we're in the face of suffering of others, or even it can be our own suffering, our own feelings of grief, there's a place in our heart that we can find that is both fully attentive and appreciative of that pain, but not swept up in a reaction against it or carried along by the current of it, that knows it fully but is not suffering on account of that. So hopefully during the course of the day we can explore that and see if we can find that place. I would like to guarantee that that you'll find it, but I can certainly guarantee that it's there, and hopefully we'll look at it and find ways and means of drawing upon that. Now, one of the other aspects of compassion that I like to stress, and we have this figure here on my right. This is a figure of Guanyin Bodhisattva. This is in the Northern Buddhist tradition, Guanyin or Guanxi as the full name, is the Chinese name for this spiritual entity, the Bodhisattva, a being who is committed to full enlightenment. And the name Guanxi in Chinese, or Kannon in Japanese, Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, literally means the one who listens to the sounds of the world. To me, that's an extremely significant name for a being who's the embodiment of compassion, because it doesn't mean that she's out there doing stuff. It's a primary role of compassion. The primordial or the primary attribute is not getting out there and doing, but the primary attribute is listening. And this other image here, this is a Tibetan tanka of the same being, and in Tibetan Guanyin is called Chenrezig, and there you have the figure has 1,000 hands, and each hand has an eye in it, so 1,000 hands and 1,000 eyes. So this kind of imagery represents more the doingness, but the name is the same. The name is still the one who listens to the sounds of the world. So another of the aspects of compassion that I'd like to look at today, and where you can find the root of this quality of sort of empathetic engagement is through the practice of listening, learning to listen, and in particular learning to listen to our own thoughts and feelings. Because we often associate compassion with an emotional, like a strong emotion, or we associate it with being in the presence of the suffering of other beings. Like this terrible tragedy that we have in the Gulf with the oil spill is destroying the lives of countless beings. Is a terrible tragedy. But in terms of working with that, or with smaller or more local difficulties and sufferings in our life, it's the primary quality of compassion. The root of compassion, I would suggest, is in learning how to listen, to attend to what is here, to what is present, and then from that attending, then as a capacity arises to do the right thing. So from that root of listening, then there are the 1,000 hands and the 1,000 eyes that are watching what's going on and then can lend a hand. Guan Yin has a lot of hands to to lend. But that multiplicity of hands is representing that, the thousands of ways, the 10,000 fingers that can help. But it comes from the root of listening. So when we talk about this, what we're learning to do is to listen to our own thoughts, listen to our own feelings, listen to our own body, and to learn to discern the different voices that we hear, or what some people I think very, very helpfully refer to as the inner committee. So that this is probably familiar to a number of you, even if you hadn't called it that. We know these guys. That the voices of reason, the voices of kindness, the voices of the 3-year-old in a tantrum, but they're all in there. The rationalist, the sensitive one, the excited child, the fretful child, the depressed and unhappy, the ever cheerful, and the voices also of unbiased kindness and unbiased wisdom. They're all in there. And so that in the meditation practices I hope to look at today, we'll explore some of that, just learning to listen to the different feelings, energies, different thoughts within the mind, and learn to discern, to not just react to the things that we feel and hear, but to find that place of listening, and then through that, then letting wisdom be the chair of the committee. That if you have ever chaired or been part of any meetings, committee meetings, there are probably a few of us have sat in on various kinds of meetings. It's important that all the voices are allowed to be heard. There's a respectful quality that all the voices are allowed to be heard. But when you have a flailing 3-year-old saying, "I want more ice cream," then you don't necessarily give the vote. Or say, "Okay, let's do what that voice wants," or the kind of high-minded intellectual. "Well, I think what's happening here is," if you ask me, say, "Well, thank you for sharing." Just like the 3-year-old who wants more ice cream, the plummy intellectual who thinks they understand everything. Say, "Okay, well, thank you for sharing too," and then finding the way that we can let wisdom be that in a way the meeting point for those different voices, those different feelings and moods. The last of the themes I thought I'd just introduce to begin the day, and that we'll look at during this time together, is how we often feel like we've got to do something. I've got to do something to make it right. And so many of these themes that the Kundanya outlined about don't diagnose, just be aware, don't try to help, don't turn away, then you can be left with this feeling of, but what am I supposed to do? I either get in there and do something, or I just leave it alone. But that doesn't feel right. So what I like to suggest is that oftentimes the most appropriate action happens when I get out of the way, or you get out of the way. That it's the me trying, me doing, the me-ness and the tryingness, that's the obstructive element. And that, in a sense, this is a self-adjusting universe. That this is that there is a trust that we can develop in that if we let the self-centered perspective be dropped, and that we let that there be a quality of awareness or wisdom, an acute attentiveness to the present, then the universe will adjust itself. That might sound a bit woolly. Does it sound woolly? You can speak freely. Very Californian. See, you've ruined me. I would never have said such things 15 years ago. But what this means is that we have there's a quality of intuitive wisdom that recognizes when things are in balance or not in balance. That's our in a way our musical ear for the way things are, for the harmonious or disharmonious quality of things. Now you might think, well, I'm tone deaf, so I might as well leave now. But I would suggest that on that spiritual level, none of us are tone deaf, and you wouldn't have come here to spend your Sunday at Spirit Rock if you were totally tone deaf. So what this means is that when we are noticing some kind of difficulty or some kind of imbalance, some sort of distortion, some discord within others or within ourselves, that if we just bring the quality of awareness to bear on that, and so the effort is to be aware, then things will adjust on their own. Now I'll do a little demonstration. It's probably some of you have seen me do this before. But so this is a little demo. This is like a kind of show and tell. So just to give an example, say by using the physical body and the feeling of the body being out of balance. So what I'm going to do is I'll just sort of adopt a slumped and uncomfortable posture. And what I'm going to do is just to simply bring awareness to that feeling in the body, and then I'll let the body adjust itself. So I, quote, won't do anything. Now you can think, well, this is all a fraud, or like, Ajahn Amro's really lost it, it's a good job he's going to England. But it's I find this is a good way of showing how this principle works. Because actually all of us know this. We've all seen this happening in different ways in our lives. When you just leave things alone, then they work it out. But so anyway, I shall so watch closely, and I'll do the best to let you see how this works. So, okay. So just as if you're like 35 minutes into a long, hot afternoon sit. Okay. So I'm not going to do anything. I didn't. Quite honestly, I'm a monk. I cannot lie. I'm not allowed to deliberately defraud. So all the sole effort I was making was to bring attention to the feeling of the body, and then the body just adjusts itself to a balanced posture. So just apply that to the whole of the rest of your life. So I'm not entirely kidding. It's learning to bring awareness, and then to not let me be the thing that has to grab the reins. I'm in charge of this committee. I'm running things. I'm running this life. I'm in charge here. If we just recognize that I, me, my feeling, and just loosen the grip on that and say, well, thank you for sharing. There's your seat, dear. And then just let that have its voice, but then instead have that quality of awareness itself be the guiding principle, the defining principle, then our actions find a quality of balance. That makes sense? Okay, so we'll try and look at that a bit more during the course of the day. So I'll finish the opening piece there. So if people want to just stretch your legs for a moment, maybe we can have a window or two open so we can breathe.